Good evening. Planning Board is now in session. First item on the agenda is a discussion, Chestnut Meadows subdivision covenant. We have the covenant, draft covenant with us for our review. It's still in draft and not quite ready yet to get our comments back from town council, so we're going to move this one to our next agenda, right?
Yes.
Next item on the agenda is discussion, EMC, Dell, Washington Street and Causland Drive roadway acceptance. Been quite a bit of correspondence since our last meeting, and I'm going to ask the town planner to take us through that correspondence, and then
Excuse me, Mr. Chairman, I need to recuse myself from this discussion. My husband's an employee for Dell EMC.
thank you. And then we'll ask counsel for EMC, Mr. Toomey, to speak after that. You ready, Karina?
Yeah.
There's quite a bit of correspondence. I'd kind of like to either go through it either just by reference or in detail if we can. The ultimate goal for this being on our agenda is to have the planning board submit a letter to the selectmen recommending or not the road acceptance. Mr. Stein.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just want to mention that I filed the proper Mullins paperwork this morning with town clerk to verify that I had viewed the part of the meeting that I missed, which this was an agenda item last meeting, as well as all the relevant materials.
And that's been filed with the town clerk?
Yes. This morning I did.
Very good. Thank you. Well, the town planner is going through the updates on the correspondence. Dan, did you want to set something, did you want to use the tripod, or?
Yeah, we have a tripod too.
Did you want to?
We do have some plans, but if they're up on the screen, I don't know if we need to or not. We're not
I
supposed
have them all, you just have to tell me which ones.
All right.
I have the roadway acceptance, I have the as-built.
Yeah, I think we just wanted to go through what's
All right,
happened since last meeting.
We'll, okay, you got to get a microphone, but we're at the point in the meeting where the town planner is going to go through the correspondence that we've received and discussions that have occurred since the last time you were here, which was our last meeting. Karina.
Okay, since you were here last, the EMC Dell and Beals and Thomas team, Karen Galligan at the DPW and I met on site to take a look at some of the lingering issues, which were comments from the Fuss and O'Neill review of the roadway acceptance and the as-built plans. I think that was the 25th of January. And at that meeting, the Karen Galligan from the DPW and UPAL had resolved the snow removal concerns that were brought up by Karen. What happened there is there's I believe, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, there'll be some kind of agreement with the contractor who does the snow removal now with the town. So they'll plow those sections, and the cost will be picked up by Dell as just kind of an add-on to the rest of the road that they're already plowing. And then the other issue we talked about were there are light bases on Causland, but no light poles yet. So there are no light poles going in until the reconstruction of that. Is that lot 1?
There's no development proposed for Lot 1, so it's the lots further down Causland
Lot 3,
Drive.
I think
So,
it's
yeah,
called,
so exactly.
Yeah.
There's lots 3 and 4 are on the western side of Causland Drive, and Lot 5 is the existing building on Causland Drive, which is on the eastern side of Causland Drive. That building is proposed to stay. So the electrical and telephone wires that are currently overhead when additional lots are built are intended to go into the underground conduit system, which has been built and is currently under the roadways out there.
Yeah, you can kind of see it on this map. It's the top left corner, sheet 3-4. That blue area is lot 1, and you're talking about just south of that. The new Washington Street is shown right there, where it says 3.4.
Yeah, just below the 3.4 is the Lot 3 label, and if you go further down, there's the Lot 4 label. As I noted, Lot 5 is the existing building on Cosland Drive that is currently occupied.
Okay,
And there's also Lot 7 as well.
Yeah.
And Lot 6 would be the wastewater treatment plant location.
okay. So the lighting, that's from the old subdivision plans. So the lighting, we also received a letter today indicating that you'll be taking care of the cost of the lights, the street lights on both Washington and on that portion of Cosland to become public.
Yes, yeah.
Right.
So the Washington lights are in, the Washington Street lights are in because there was no overhead conflicts. That's a new roadway. Those lights are powered up by the same feeder that feeds the Washington Street lights in Westborough. So what we've agreed to do is that EMC will own and maintain the lights. The utility company bills the town on a per light basis. So whatever the cost is billed to the town, EMC will reimburse the town for those lights that are on Washington Street in Southborough.
So those are the two major things we discussed at the meeting with the DPW. The other thing, there were 2 catch basins that were missing the hoods for trapping oil. And there was a pedestrian sign there for a crosswalk, which had tipped over. And today we received a letter from Paul Fitzgerald, right? I think it was from you, indicating, no, we got it from Tom Mikulik, right?
Yeah.
Tom from Beals and Thomas, indicating that the catch basin hoods had been installed, the pedestrian sign had been installed. There were some minor changes to the as-built plans, some labeling and some typos and things like that.
Yeah, and that was at the request of the DPW. It's responding to the DPW comments.
That's right.
Yep.
So we received review comments from both Fuss and O'Neill and from the DPW as required by the roadway acceptance policy. And based on the letters and the updated plans you're submitting, those were addressed. The snow removal has been resolved with DPW. The lighting issue, there's a letter stating there'll be an agreement, so that's something will have to be worked out with town council for something formalized. And then the other item was Attorney Toomey was going to draft a warrant article for the roadway acceptance. And that has been done, and Aldo has reviewed it, and we received review comments back from Aldo, who said that it is fine. It's acceptable in the format it is, and that we were to ensure that the subdivision plan, the definitive subdivision conditions, correlated to what was on the as-built and such. So Beals and Thomas, as part of their letter, indicated that that the project met the requirements of the definitive subdivision. And that was signed by Tom Mikulik, who's a professional engineer. So here we are.
Did you want to go, Dan?
Nope. If there's any questions, we're happy to answer them.
All right, I'll open up to the board. Mr. Mills?
So I just, catching up with some of the other pieces, the abutters list, that's all been notified? It's complete?
Sorry. When you look at the roadway acceptance policy, there are 3 parts to it, in a sense. Part A is that they have to request by the first week in January to have the roadway accepted. And then they need to get deficiency lists, if there are any, from DPW and then from the third-party reviewer, which was Fuss and O'Neill, and a letter from their engineer saying that everything was built. So they've done that. Part B is then they come to planning board looking to get the roadway plans endorsed in not a public hearing, but as a discussion item. And also, if the planning board votes to endorse it and votes to recommend a layout, then we write a recommendation letter to the Board of Selectmen. It's not until they get that, they have a whole list of things that they have to give to the Board of Selectmen. It's the Board of Selectmen's hearing that they need to do the abutters list for.
No questions?
And we have requested the certified abutters list, so we do have the abutters list, but the notification, as Karina noted, wouldn't go out until after the planning board makes their recommendation to the selectmen.
That's when the Board of Selectmen allows them to schedule a hearing. Once planning board is on board with the roadway acceptance plans as presented, and writes a recommendation to lay out the road to the Board of Selectmen, they will take, the design team takes that to the Board of Selectmen, who then will allow them to schedule a hearing with the Board of Selectmen if they supply a whole list of other items, like a title search, deed, any easements or anything like that.
Mr. Jenks?
The town council has also stated that the planning board should verify compliance with prior subdivision plans back from 2008, together with an endorsed roadway layout plan for the selectmen's consideration. Have we done that?
We had Fuss and O'Neill review the as-built plans in conformance with the roadway layout plans. During those discussions, I had asked Fuss and O'Neill if they were in agreement that those plans met the definitive subdivision, and it was their understanding that they did. Fuss and O'Neill provided us a comment letter that kind of touched base on the as-built and the roadway acceptance, but it was over a telephone conversation that they felt that the plans, that the roadway, that the subdivision roadways were built in conformance with the subdivision plans. I do have a set of the old subdivision plans, but I myself haven't checked that it is, but Fuss and O'Neill did not have a major concern with that.
Do you know if they did look at the 2008 subdivision plan?
I think they did, because I asked them, because I couldn't find a copy here. They sent me the copy of the plans from the subdivision approval from.
I think we need to ask that question specifically, where council has stated that we should verify that.
Okay, I can do that.
Nothing further.
Mr. Stein?
So where did we land as far as who's going to pay the electric bills and who's going to plow?
If Attorney Toomey or Mr. Fitzgerald would like to address that?
On the, on who's going to plow, I think that the situation is that the town will contract with the snowplow company that's historically done it, and then EMC would pay what the town incurs for that.
So what, is the town of Westborough involved in that at all, or?
I don't know.
When we had the meeting on site, the town of Westborough is already plowing down Washington Street over the town line to the intersection of Washington and Coslin, so New Washington Street and Coslin. So that in itself is already taken care of. They've already taken that on board. They're doing it now. The agreement we have with Karen, I believe she's already made contact with our current provider, Browser Construction, is that she will enter into a small agreement or a discrete agreement for that. How long is it at the end? That 500 yards of Coslin, which will become public. And the contract between plowing vendor and the town will be just that. And then any costs incurred, I told Karen that we would pick up the cost. In essence, we have our contractor plowing our private way, going over the threshold line into public way, We just wanted some agreement that the town would be contracting that. Other than that, the cost will come back to Dell EMC. Your comment on the power, I think Dan touched on it. When we did the development, the infrastructure that supports the lights is actually on an N-grid meter, both in Westboro and Southborough. And to Dan's point, they charge back on a per, I think on a per lamp base, if I'm not mistaken. I can't tell you how many lamps there are, but whatever that cost would be, again, we can come up with the appropriate way to bill Dell EMC back. It's not an issue. I just don't know the mechanics of the tool to do that. It's very minor.
I just want to add to that, just going back to Phil's question real quickly. I take it back. When I spoke with Fuss and O'Neill on the phone, I asked them if they did look at the because I didn't see it in their letter. They revised their comment letter to include that, to specify that. It says, Fuss and O'Neill has reviewed the street acceptance plan of land of Costlin and Washington in order to determine if it was constructed in accordance to the approved plans and as shown on the as-built plan. So the review comments were considering all of that. And in addition to that, we have a verification letter from Beals and Thomas indicating that as a professional engineer signing this, that they have built it in accordance with the approved definitive subdivision plans. This letter.
Thank you. That's
Okay.
good.
Karen did publish a memo.
Right.
Yes.
I have a copy.
You'll also note in your package, there's a memo from the DPW that I included, dated January 26th. And it touches upon the snow removal issue and then also the lights. Looks like this. And this was prior to resolving the light concern with your letter dated February 2nd, indicating that you will take responsibility for the lights and that, operation and maintenance, and that you'll also work with town council to come up with a formalized agreement that either is referenced in the warrant or recorded or something that legitimizes.
So, I guess just in our letter to the selectmen, we would be referencing this document as, we're hanging our hat on this, basically saying that in due course, they will formalize everything that the gentleman was just saying. Right? Okay. Got it. Thank you.
So, the Attorney Toomey last Thursday emailed town council, that's in our packet, and there's, in the third paragraph, it says, assuming the warrant article is adopted at town meeting, I expect that the town would take by eminent domain an easement in the relocated Washington Street and the portion of Cosland Drive to be accepted. EMC does not expect any damages for such taking. EMC is also willing to convey such easement to the town by release deed for nominal consideration. I went over this, I guess it's the legal process or the state law regarding discontinuation and all of that with Aldo, but I don't remember ever hearing from him this eminent domain and nominal consideration. Can you tell us what this is all about? He hasn't responded, is that correct?
No, I haven't heard back from him.
Okay.
And just, you may have seen, I updated the warrant article to include a description of the plans today. So what we're talking about there is, there's two ways for the town to get title to what is going to be the New Washington Street and the public portion of Cosland Drive. One would be for EMC to convey it to the town, and another would be for the town to take it by eminent domain. I think we're willing to do both, but I think usually what I see is the town, even if they were to get a conveyance of an easement for that roadway, or for those roadways, they oftentimes do a confirmatory taking, just so that they know they have all of the interests that they expect to have in that road, and to wipe out any other interests, so to speak, which is why the Board of Selectmen get a title certification, so they know who owns everything there. And so when I say that it's for nominal consideration, money doesn't really change hands. You usually say consideration for less than $100. In the eminent domain context, the town could do the taking and we would waive any right to damages. Usually when you do a taking, you've got to pay just compensation, but in a taking like this, we don't expect anything.
Well, I'll let you and Aldo work that out, but in my time on the board, I don't remember, we've had some discontinued roads. We've had roads that we thought were discontinued and were not. And of course, we've created countless roads throughout the town. But I don't ever remember this happening with any of those. So we'll just keep an eye on it and see what town council advises as far as moving ahead. But you say there's two ways to do it, and did you say that EMC's okay with either?
Yes, usually, you know, if we give a release deed, then we don't expect to get any consideration. You know, the deed would recite, you know, for less than $100, and money doesn't change hands. And then for the eminent domain, we would, I think what we would do is to waive any right to damages, and that would be in writing. So I can work with Aldo on that, but what would be taken is an easement over those roadways, because usually with a discontinuance where the town has previously acquired or accepted the road, once they discontinue, the owners on each side own to the center line.
Right.
But it's you know, while it's, before it's discontinued, it's subject to the town's acceptance of an easement to pass and repass for the public.
Okay. Open it up to the public. Any questions or comments? Mr. Stein?
So what's the time frame to formalize the lights and maintenance and the snowplow maintenance?
Chris Toomey, I will work with Aldo on what he sees as the appropriate timing. I would think that they, you know, it's something that'll probably be resolved prior to or around the same time as the selectmen's meeting.
But well before town meeting?
Yeah, well before
Okay,
town meeting,
great.
yes.
Thank you.
I could be clear. I think the DPW superintendent has an action there as well, so I can't speak for her, but Karen had the action to kind of execute that discrete agreement with our snow plowing vendor.
So if there's no other questions or comments, then I'd ask the board their feelings regarding a letter of recommendation. What I would propose is if the board does feel that we would write a letter of recommendation that you speak to any conditions that you would want listed on that letter, if any, and if you would entrust myself and the town planner to draft that letter in conjunction with town council. Mr. Mills?
So there's no motion, you just want to,
Well, you can do a motion if you want. I didn't know if you wanted to discuss it. If you're ready for a motion, fine.
you guys ready for a motion? Are you? Mr. Chairman, I make a motion that we recommend the acceptance of Washington Street and the section of Causland Drive depicted on the map of Washington Street discontinuance and relocation plan of land in Southborough dated February 2nd, 2018. And the discontinuance of the old Washington Street entrance section.
Subject to
Subject.
completion of the agreement for maintenance and
Subject to completion of the agreement for maintenance. Is there a second?
second.
Motion's been made and seconded. Any discussion? Does that include entrusting myself and the town planner to
It does.
draft it?
Yes.
I just had one discussion item. Last time EMC was here and Dell was here, we talked about how much time you had to do this, since you missed the window of opportunity last year. And it seemed like you came in at the very last minute this time around. And I think at our last meeting, we said, you've got some homework to do. If you get it all done, then it should go smoothly. You got it all, at least to this point, it seems like it's done. But a lot of the stuff was dropped off this afternoon. So that's the type of thing that other boards in town would not entertain. But we have a strong town planner, and she was able to take the materials, go through them, distribute them to us to the point where we are right now. So appreciate you getting it done, but if there's more actions to be done, recommend that you don't wait until a few hours before whatever your next meeting is or deadline is for the town to take action. Appreciate it.
And we appreciate the help of town planner. She's really helped us push this along, so we do appreciate that.
You must know that in her helping you today, there's at least one other customer that has been waiting for action by this planning department, and they were slightly bumped off the schedule to accommodate your needs today. So what's going to happen, I hope not, but that group will maybe have some comments about how long it took us to do something. And part of the reason that it takes us longer to do certain things is to accommodate these last-minute submittals. And we don't, the public doesn't see that. They see the things that maybe take longer than they should, but they don't see the things that we do to keep things moving along, especially, things that if we step on them, they can get done and everything keeps moving. And in this case, there's a lot more work to be done by Dell and EMC to get across the finish line. And also, again, the letter of recommendation from the planning board is just that. And we've seen it where the planning board would make a recommendation to the selectmen for acceptance of a roadway, only to have a problem stay open until the night of town meeting and have a town official, a member of the public, get to the microphone and say, there's a problem. We don't think we should do this. And it doesn't go. So taking, a letter of recommendation is what it is from the board. Hopefully you'll get all your homework done, get all the things in, and at that magic moment when the warrant article comes up at town meeting, the town officials can get up and say, it's good to go, we recommend that the town vote to accept. We hope that happens. But we know that sometimes it doesn't. Motion's been made and seconded. Any other discussion? All in favor? 4-0. Thanks a lot. We'll try to get that letter out, barring anybody coming in and asking us to do something for them at the last moment.
We do need to get the Mylar endorsed so they can leave that and pick it up tomorrow.
Okay. Here, so
Yep. So you have a Mylar and some hard copies?
I have the Mylar and 2 hard copies of the as-bills. We can get you the,
We need a couple more copies of the Mylar plan because we need 3 signed. The Mylar and 2 copies.
Two
2 hard
paper
copies,
copies?
just paper.
Okay.
2 paper
Did you
copies.
bring any paper copies?
I just have, no, the 2 Mylars.
Can we bring those over tomorrow, or?
Well, say they have to sign them.
Bring them over tomorrow. And what we do is we come in as we're in town and get them signed.
Okay.
There's 4 of us.
But leave those Mylars here, and we'll sign those already tonight
Okay.
in case we run into snowstorm or something, and because then they can always be copied if we had to.
All right.
So we need the Mylars. And the warrant article, does any action have to be taken on that?
Hold on a second. Is there a problem with leaving the Mylars?
No.
'Cause you
No,
can-
not at
no,
all. We've
no,
got
I just-
one set of Mylars for you to endorse.
I just wanted to make sure the Mylars were in there. There's paper on the outside, there were Mylars on the inside. That's what,
Okay.
I want to make sure we had the one copy.
Karina.
So that's 2 sets of Mylars of the roadway acceptance, or 1 Mylar set
1 Mylar set,
of the 2 roadway acceptance plans, and then 1 set of as-bills?
2 sets of as-bills.
2 sets of hard copy as-bills? Okay. You're gonna need a bunch of copies for Board of Selectmen, just so you know.
Okay.
So we'll need 2 paper copies of the roadway acceptance would be helpful. But if you leave those here, we'll get those signed tonight. You can always drop another set off tomorrow.
Copies at the office.
You can take one of them if you want, and just leave 1 original.
Our office is right down the road. We could take the Mylars back, run copies, and then bring back the
Okay.
Mylars and 2 copies if you're going to be here for a half hour, 45 minutes.
That saves a lot of effort.
Yeah, that way we're not trying to do it tomorrow and making all the board members come in and
Yeah.
stuff like
Okay.
that. If you so, we can run it back to the office. Want to do that? Let's do that.
Yeah, if
We
you
don't have
mind.
much left on our agenda, so don't
We'll go quick.
don't
We'll
stop
go
for
quick.
coffee.
We're right down the road.
That
so.
saves
Okay.
a lot of time.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks. So I guess leave what you can.
No,
Just make
no,
sure you have
this is
copies.
correct. Okay, next item on the agenda is a discussion, 25 Park Street, proposed project, engineering design consultants. Mr. Bemis is here. This is a introductory discussion. Mr. Bemis is going to present potential future action. Do you want, will we have that up on the screen? Okay.
Because I only have some things to lay out in front of me. But I can talk with the speaker too. So you don't have to turn around. If I could lay it here, I think everyone will see I highlighted it.
Wonderful.
Peter Bemis,
Hold on a
engineering.
second,
Yep,
Peter.
sure. Well, no, you're gonna go back one, Karina. Yep, I'm gonna start with that.
The plan you got on the table, which is color-coded,
Just highlighted it.
helps
just-
us. So, for the public, you've got to speak.
I will.
But you're on, Peter.
All right, thank you. Good
Thank
evening. Peter Bemis, Engineering Design Consultants. I'm here on behalf of the Morrow family. This is Callie Morrow's children. Callie has since passed. Callie was a foreman with the Department of Public Works in town, and then his dad was involved in this property as well. So this is 3 generations, and his children are basically our age, even you. Maybe one of the older kids, I don't know, but you know what I mean. So this property has some interesting history going back to 1969. That's the first plan that's up here, and I'm looking at the north end of that sheet. And that's what I've highlighted in green, because that's the only thing that you see about the Morrow property in 1969 is what's left of the land. They subdivided it. I have no idea how far Mr. Morrow's property went. I think it was somewhat extensive. Don may know from growing up here how I know it went all the way down to White Bagley, but I'm not sure who owned what because there were some other families that owned properties here. But this was the B&B was the realty trust that divided this and created Peggy and Foley. And Foley terminated in a cul-de-sac and basically landlocked the Morrow property here. Their house number is 25. And for illustration purposes,
25 Park Street.
25 Park Street, right, so I want to
And the
show
plan you have here before us is mostly showing Foley.
Foley, right, but this is how I know it's 25 Park, other than the assessor's office telling me that it is. Goodness sake. Park Street, 25. Do we know what that is? Everybody knows. Okay, good. Do you know, Mimi? Have you been down Park? So it Ted's? Yeah. Okay, so that's basically the beginning of the old driveway, which again, I have pictures of that too, to kind of show you how you traverse down there to go past. This is paralleling the railroad tracks, basically, to get there. Yeah, so everybody else, because I know this is kind of their stomping grounds, but you know, you probably walk down here. Okay, good, all right, because it's a lovely spot. So I'm starting off with a 69 plan because that's kind of how we get to where we go from here. It starts it. The second plan, and if you would, Karina, just flip me ahead to the next one, please. And I've highlighted this plan to show you what was the same limits of the Foley Drive lot, which was Brian Morrow's home. So this is one of Callie's children, and he lived in this house going back until, I think it was 2011, he actually did sell the home. So in 2011, what he did was provide a strip of land that connected to Foley Drive, and that's shown on the plan there as parcel A, allowing him to have some frontage on Foley, because otherwise it was a landlocked property, okay? And in order to do that, Brian's lot would have needed to get some land from Callie so that he could have sufficient land area, because he had frontage, but he didn't have enough area. So they took this wedge out, and that's what's shown in green, and that's shown on the plan too. Thank you, Karina. So those two pieces swapped. What this plan does give you is more detail, so you can see the house, which you didn't see in 69. So you can see the house. This is Callie's home. His daughter Lisa lives in the house now. That's the garage. This is the driveway. This is that gravel road that goes back out to Park Street. And the sign would be about here at Ted's. As we come down, again, some of those photos you can see through the back lot here. So it's a nice meadow area here, a lawn. I mean, they really have kept up the property quite nicely. And then this barn. And again, Mimi, I know you, everyone else knows because they've gone by it 100 times, but it's a beautiful stone barn. The trouble with the stone barn is it needs a lot of work. The roof's going to fall in. So from my perspective, I've got a historic home because it's going to meet our historic definitions today, and I've got a historic barn, which again would meet our definitions. The barn is in dire need of attention, and the house could certainly use a little bit of work too. What we're looking at is what can we do with this property, because the kids need to do something. Callie's estate needs to be settled, and the children now need to determine what to do with the property. And they have 2 acres of land, interestingly zoned business village. That's the line shown on the plan here. Everything this way is business village. Everything this way is Res B. So basically, that's what this portion of the land use would permit. The other interesting thing is it doesn't meet the Res B requirements, and it doesn't meet the village business requirements, because we only have this frontage on the cul-de-sac, and it's 5136. So we came up with a couple of ideas. The first one is what I did submit to Karina. And it's the next one, and I'm sorry it's small on that board. I made it larger when I printed it here. It's 11 by 17. Thank you, Karina. Great. One more time. Yep, that's going to do it. So what we're looking at is, and again, in this exhibit, it's orange, so that's the right-of-way. It would require 12,408 square feet. And if you just run the hand along that, Karina? Yep, that's the right-of-way. It's coming off of Foley Drive. We leave the frontage the way it is because 2 Foley Drive needs that frontage to be part of its lot. And we're just wrapping around because we don't have any rights to go over that property. If Brian was still the owner, it would have been easy to do. But if Don has the benefit of knowing Callie, I don't know if any of you knew Callie, but he was probably not an easy guy to convince what to do, and might have been the right thing to do, because it would have been so easy just to extend Foley Drive and put the cul-de-sac here and have done everything that I'm trying to draw. But he just didn't want to go there. So now I'm left with trying to make something work. And I can take the right-of-way. It's going to be variable width through this section. I've got some awkward geometry, but I can preserve the existing home so that then his daughter Lisa can have this lot. And then we would create 2 lots, one of which the barn can stay on, and possibly someone could try to restore that at this point as part of developing on this lot. And if it's determined that it's beyond its ability to be restored, they might be able to at least use the materials that are here, because there's some very nice field stones. This would also allow us to kind of end this area, so it's in a nice finished product, bring it in tune with the rest of the neighborhood, so we don't have a village business zoned property here, so that the folks who already live in Foley Drive would have more homes around them. I'd also, like this portion of this driveway is on railroad property. This is actually the boundary to the railroad. We would eliminate all of this connection. This part here, I'm gonna have to let the railroad speak to itself, but if it doesn't connect any longer, no one's gonna go there, and it would probably just naturalize on its own. So this subdivision would require some waivers from your requirements. I have a fairly smaller turnaround here. I really don't see us needing to necessarily create the full turnaround. The thought that I had was that we would come in with basically a common driveway, if you will, to serve these lots, and we could have some sort of loop back in here that maybe can connect the driveways, so that the fire chief, for life safety considerations, would have that met. We need to create this for frontage, however, so to create the legal frontages. That's one scenario. The one that I didn't have for you when I submitted was to take a quick look at this as a flexible development. In other words, use this to establish what we can do for the property as an existing house and 2 lots. And alternatively, we would just keep the existing house and put either a duplex, which that option would afford, or these can just be separated into 2. But we would put basically 3 dwelling units on what is just going to be under an acre of land, and then we have an acre of land, a little bit over an acre of land of open space. I'm sorry I didn't submit that in the packet, but when I thought about this today, the reason why we came up with it was because that meets the frontage requirements. Interestingly, I wouldn't need anything else. This is, you need 50 feet of frontage, as you might recall from what we just did at the church, next to the church. this would comply with zoning, and you would have the ability to grant that under your powers for flexible development. And whether we do a duplex or not, I just wanted you to see it with a duplex because you're allowed to have 2/3 multi, 1/3 single, even though we have 3 units, that's our 2/3, 1/3. And then we would put, again, this structure could either be raised and let the open space either naturalize, or what I'd mentioned to the kids was that, kids, they're my age, but that we could create like a little maybe soccer field or something down here that the neighborhood could use. But then the issue was, how do we get there? So I don't know. Just having passive open space or having a garden for the homeowners to use may be a nice feature if we could work that out, if you're inclined to go in this direction. I know that if I lived in the neighborhood, I'd probably rather the traditional subdivision that I had showed you here. I just need the board to be aware that I do need some waivers to do this, and I'd prefer not to build the cul-de-sac, have these 2 cul-de-sacs like this. I'd rather see that we just kind of create a driveway here that these homeowners could then share in common and be responsible for the maintenance of. So I didn't want to submit anything to you because it was complicated, and I'm trying to help the kids out. There's, I want to say it's 4 daughters and 1 son. 5 daughters. I was just going to say that Brian must have been a popular guy because he's got 3 cute sisters, and I would think that everybody was probably trying to be Brian's friend growing up. So that's where I'm at. Need some direction from you folks.
Thank you, Mr. Bemis. You're right, Callie was a legend in the town of Southborough, worked for the DPW for decades. His son Brian and I are the same age, went through Little League together, all that stuff. And you're right, he was a very popular guy. Still is. Yep. Appreciate you coming in. I'm going to run it through the board, but when you mentioned the plan that you have here that shows that kind of mini cul-de-sac, I'm sure you're aware that there are examples throughout the town where the planning board has approved a plan showing either a common driveway or a roadway on the plan, which creates the right-of-way, but is not necessarily built. So there are examples. The direction you're heading in, there are examples of that around town. I would say that for any of these, I think the board would need to be guided by the public safety as far as how they would feel about access to whatever was going to be built there.
I would go see Chief Morrow before I submitted to you a preliminary plan. I really just didn't even want to initiate with a preliminary until I at least spoke with you first. So
Mr.
tonight.
Mills.
So I'm familiar with the property, walking to get my car serviced at J&J. Coming down, I have, and even when I first moved in, there were goats that lived in the stone barn. And I know the barn, I think it's in this northern corner, there's like a 2-inch gap that goes all the way from the roof down to the foundation, so I know the
You've seen it.
disrepair that you're talking about. And you can see it tilting out, so there's definitely a lot of work. It's someone who would want to live in a barn that used to be inhabited by goats. They need to put into it if they wanted to keep it.
Right.
So I guess there's no option to continue using the drive.
The interesting thing with
Currently.
this is I don't see where we even have, I think they gave Callie an easement for his driveway here, from what Brian had said to me, but we wouldn't have the right to create a road. So I wasn't going to try to come into the board here tonight and say, I want to connect to Park Street and come down here to create my frontage, or I have frontage on this way. I wasn't going to go there. To me, this is just a private driveway over property owned by the railroad. That's all it is. That's all it ever was. At some point, Park Street has an official layout, terminates, that's it. And we don't have the right to extend that as far as I'm concerned, so that's why this made more sense to us, which we do have a right to go out to Foley now that Brian deeded this portion of the land to his dad back in 2011.
Yeah, because it is very wet back here. I mean, this
Yes,
is
it is.
all
Yeah, Callie
Stream.
built this pond back here. There's a little pond there.
It's got a lot of goldfish in there.
I don't know about goldfish any longer, but there may have been goldfish in there at one time.
I mean, so you're looking for preference of what you'd like
No.
to see?
I was just, I need to go forward with this project. To me, that the conventional plan's pretty straightforward, as long as we can grant some waivers. I really didn't want to build a road. That's all I was afraid of, was if we had to build a road, I'd prefer to do something like this, because the kids are not, they're not developers. I mean, that's not what they do.
Yeah, personally, knowing that it is, you're right, this, I know there used to be a whirligig thing here that the kids would play on too.
Yes.
That, I don't know if it's still there or not.
I think the
The-
remnants of it are still there.
that
Actually, I
it's the
thought it could tell
safest
some,
thing,
I was gonna
yeah.
say that, I bet that thing could tell some stories.
But it is a nice, I mean, if it was able to be used for some type of open space, but I know that most people just cut across
They do.
to Foley Drive to get there. I don't know how accepting the neighbor would be for that, but,
I don't either.
um,
We're gonna certainly include him in, as part of the process. I'm gonna reach out to him, but I just didn't want to do anything until I had at least spoke with you first about what our plan
personally, if
is.
we were doing these, I'd like to see them split.
Singles, yeah, okay. I thought it was easy to put the duplex on there in
Yeah.
case someone was inclined to say they'd rather see that, so I figured, it's easy to separate them.
That would be my preference.
Okay.
Mr. Jenks?
Peter, this triangle, did you say that is now part of this?
It is.
So that's been done,
That was done in 2011.
and that was to make up for this?
Yes, it was.
Have you given any thought to whether or not it would be advantageous to have a road here?
I'd have to talk to the railroad.
Well,
There would be another
I'm
way out.
just saying if you had it.
Yeah, it would be another way out. I'm not sure it would be a desirable one, personally. I had never driven down here. I had also only gone to Ted's, and it
Yep.
says "do not pass," and I never passed in all my years. So I knew of this house being here at the end of Foley Drive, and always wondered, and I always admired the barn, because when you see it from the street, it's like, wow, that's really cool, until you get inside it, and then you realize how bad it is. But I didn't really give it any thought. We would have to obviously work with the railroad to do it, and I'm not sure what benefit there would be, other than a shortcut for someone that I don't think would be desirable personally, for people to cut through Foley Drive to get to the center of town.
Unless the fire department thought it was a benefit.
Different story.
Yep.
Um,
Where are the tracks? How far?
They're closed. I want to say it's just on the other side of this. I can put them on when I do my
Okay.
future exhibits, so you'll know. Because then the strip isn't really that full, now you're getting into Falcone's,
Yep.
and his land isn't really deep, and then you're right out to Boston.
I was thinking the tracks were further away, and I was going to recommend that you do talk to the railroad because, in my experience, they're not nearly as difficult about giving up land that they're not using as they used to be.
Because,
Um,
sorry, there is something in here where there's storage, like
Right.
sometimes
The-
Falcone's trucks are
Falcone's
stored.
trucks, I think,
Right.
and they have an easement, they have a lease with the railroad, right, and that's their driveway. That's why we put that on here, but that's why I'm saying from this point back, this would probably stay the way it is today, but from here forward, we would eliminate, unless If that's one of the things that Chief Morrow comes back with, he says, do this, but I'd like to keep that. But I would want to definitely put some sort of passage prevention, if you will, a gate, which
Yep.
the chief can have the key to, but I wouldn't want anyone to be using this as their pass-through.
I don't know that I could tell you tonight which would be my preference if it came down to one or the other. I appreciate you coming in and putting these down in front of us to look at, but something I'd want to think about a little bit. So you're dealing with these 3 lots?
Correct.
You're not dealing with this?
No.
Dealing with these 3 lots. None of them have frontage at this point.
This would have the existing,
I'm
right.
not talking about would have.
Yep.
I'm
No,
talking about today.
today, there's 51.34 feet of frontage on Foley Drive for the
whole-
2-acre parcel.
Okay.
That's it, which is non-compliant with Village and it's non-compliant
Right.
with Res B. So
Yep.
I need to do something to correct that. So that's where this comes in on right-of-way. And then basically we extend the right-of-way to create the other 2 lots. And this lot configuration, I know it looks a little awkward. It'd be nice to straighten them out, but you have your lot shape requirement. We didn't want to have any variances with anything on here other than the waivers you need to give us for the road. So the circles, Karina will appreciate this in CAD, they sit in here and we show how they travel down each portion of the right-of-way and they meet all the
Right.
lot shape requirements. That's why it looks the way it does. There's really probably a couple of solutions to doing this, and that's it.
And there's no thought of doing something with the Village Business District?
I didn't think Foley Drive folks would like that. Believe me, if we came in this way, it would make some sense, but then I back up to folks who live on Lattisquama here, and so they would see this in their back. One thing that surprised me this time of year, when you stand out here, stand right in front of the garage, I mean, you see right into Falcone's garage,
Right.
you at the gas station, so you can see right there. So we have to realize, where we are and what we have here next to us. From my perspective, I think it'd be better to have residential in the residential neighborhood and stop the whole thing. And actually, you still have warrant articles? You want to change the zoning? We could do that. Otherwise, we're allowed in Village Business to do Res B, long as you comply with the Res B requirements. So that's what I did. So that's what, from my perspective, once this is done and you sign this as a residential subdivision, definitive subdivision, and we get the lots, it's going to be that. It wouldn't be anything else. It will be Res B. It's not going to be, and we could covenant to that effect as well, which I think the neighbors would prefer to have. You're bringing closure. That's why I started with 1969. This could have been done in 69, except I'm sure that Mr. Morrow had no intentions. He wanted to live in this house. He was at 25 Park, and probably he drove home every night and came down this way and never came off of Foley.
I was only asking about that because we have a very active economic development group, and they've been looking very closely at the Village District.
Well, it's a possibility. I just personally don't think it's a good one for where it is as a designer.
Yeah.
And the family didn't ask me to go in that direction.
Okay. Yeah, I can't really give you an opinion at this point, but
Okay.
I'm sure I will.
Thank you.
Mr. Stein?
So Peter, why do you think that the area, the surrounding people would prefer the conventional over the flex?
Oh, I'm not sure they would necessarily would or would not. I put it out there because if you as a board came back and said this has to be done to a subdivision standard, and it's going to cost them a fair amount of money to do it that way. So that's why I thought, well, this is another way to do it. So they wouldn't have to necessarily do that. They'd be putting in a private driveway, and actually you can see that on here, and this is the exhibit that I didn't have, so Karina can't put it on the board, but that's the driveway coming in, and you come in with a single driveway to these 2 units, and they can be separated. It's nice that you can set aside the open space, but it does make it a little bit tighter to do it. I mean, that's the whole point of that flexible provision, is to create the open space. And it has a certain threshold that you have to do it in, percentage-wise. Although you folks could waive that, and we could move this over a little bit and spread these out. To me, that would be another option.
Yeah, I mean, having walked through that area many, many times, I would think that the flex is going to be better received by the community,
Okay.
and something that certainly preserves that corridor connection, through to Park Street, and that would be my suggestion.
Okay.
And
The other part about this was that then the barn's just gonna fall down. By putting it on a lot, I gave it at least a fighting chance to be maybe reused. And again, the materials might be able to be reused. We could maybe take them off of here and bring them there. At some point, someone needs to evaluate the barn, whether it's even salvageable or not. But by putting it on its own lot, the thought that I had was that someone then may be able to come in with deep enough pockets and do something with that. Because it's a really neat structure, but it, like you said, it's got some serious problems.
I mean, that strikes me as unlikely, but I could be wrong. So I guess I'll give it some more thought myself.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Mrs. Luttrell, back to Mr. Jenks.
Where is the plan that showed the properties here? Do you have that?
Oh, yeah. So if I was to put it back in the same orientation, so you're seeing the backs of these are the Ladisquama lots.
Yeah.
It doesn't keep going up here, but when we do our plan, we will show that for you.
Just bring it over here a minute. Yeah.
And it may be on the other one too, if you'd like.
No.
That's 1969. You're not
Great.
gonna know too many of those people still.
Yeah, I do, and this is what I was interested in, and we're over, I may be in a butter.
Oh dear.
It's not shown on there, but
We probably.
I just realized.
Okay, well, okay, so
So
I got,
this isn't here.
well, it's not here
formally,
official,
so I
right,
don't-
but I would want your input anyways. So we have Schuster. Did you buy from them?
No, I'm on the other side of the street.
Oh, they're not on butter.
There's 300 feet site plan.
Oh, no, I thought this was up there, yeah.
This is deep. These
Yep,
lots on
okay.
Ladisquama are deep.
Okay,
I bet 300 feet. We'll be close. Well, I hope you can sit on this.
Mrs. Luttrell.
I'd like to see the subdivision approval, just to make sure that there are no conditions that would prohibit the extension of the cul-de-sac.
I'll check that out. Distance-wise, we did look at that, to vet that. Peggy comes down at the Peggy intersection to here. It's, I want to say like, I'm probably 600 feet to the end of my cul-de-sac. So it's not too long as far as the length goes for the dead end. If it was no connection, like if it didn't go all the way down Foley and come back out, what's the other one down there, please? What's the other road at the end of Foley? It turns into McNeil,
McNeil.
excuse me, McNeil. So that, to this end, would be over like 1,500 feet.
Yeah, that's what it is.
So if it came all the way, Birchwood, okay. But I don't think the 1969 subdivision requirement had any provision for,
Well, just the approval of any conditions on there,
I'll
just
check.
to.
I'll check.
And this may be shocking, but I like the flex plan too.
Okay,
And I think, as well as the open space, that I don't mind the duplex that adds to the, I just lost my word. Diversity of housing stock. Thank you, Mr. Stein.
If we did go in that direction, could we do you think you'd support flexibility on how much open space we set aside? Because the formula is really tight. It's that 55% rule, and it hurts.
You're hitting me where
I
it
know,
hurts.
but if I go in that direction, that's the one thing I have trouble with, is it's tight. You know, if we had a different configuration, you know, it worked really well at Boston because we had such a deep lot. Here, the geometry is just totally different. You don't have to decide now. I'm throwing it out at you, because I probably would apply with a lower ratio, just because I think we need some flexibility in how we site the houses. I don't really want to have them clustered right on top of each other.
Doesn't look like it would be huge.
The difference,
Yeah.
percentage-wise, we'd probably still be giving you like about 30,000 square feet instead of like 45. So, but as ratios go, percentage-wise, it would probably look like a bad number. It would be like 30% instead of 55%. But it would still be a nice set-aside, and it's a beautiful piece. I mean, this is really nice. I encourage you to go down here. These were nice days, but you can see how nice that is in there.
And maybe historical could help out with that
Possibly.
barn. I mean, there may be the ability to get some CPC funding or something.
Okay.
Thank you.
Peter, you brought a lot of projects before this board over the years, and I'm sure you can remember putting things on the table and showing the board different things and getting strong opinions if we thought things were not the greatest idea for the neighborhood. So what I'm hearing here tonight is that I'm not hearing any really
Yeah, this is good.
pushback. It sounds like the board is, open to, some flexibility. That seems like whatever you're proposing at this point, the board doesn't have a problem with it.
Great.
I'm not hearing, although I didn't hear that the board would waive things to make it better, but I suppose if some of the things that were to be waived, some of the hard rules were to be waived or adjusted, that would make a minor impact on the rules, but make a significant improvement to the project. It sounds like
Yeah.
you might want to give some thought to that type of thing.
All right, thank you. Thank you. All right, we look forward to getting an application into you.
I
sometime
think
next
what you
month.
hear, what you either heard or pretty much heard was that, we would love to hear feedback from how you made out with the neighbors.
Okay.
And also with public safety.
Okay.
And then I have one more question. As we stated earlier, Callie was a long, long time DPW worker, and there was a grader that he used to operate in the snowstorms. It had no heat, and you had to stand up to drive it, and he'd use it all over town. And it was a big piece of equipment. Difficult to drive, but he did it year after year, decade after decade. And when he retired, people will remember the grader hadn't been used in a number of years, but it was still sitting down at the DPW. And so what they did was Ted's towed it over to White's Corner restaurant, and they covered it with a tarp. And they had Callie's retirement party at White's, and took him outside, and they pulled the tarp off it, and they gave him the grader. So the last time I saw it, it was outside the barn. It was next to the barn. You know if it's
Okay.
still there?
You know what? That could be what's under the tarp. I don't. There's some neat stuff inside.
I think it's there.
Yeah, I think it is. I think it
And
is.
there's a truck too, because someone would grade this like
I
every
bet that's what
year.
he used it for, Don. I bet that's what he was using it for.
I think Kelly got it running again, and
Yep.
he might have used it around the property.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Well, all I know is that the merry-go-round thing that's there, I gotta believe that was the thing that the kids would get that thing spinning. Those are the types that you'd slide right off of it, in the air, because you'd get so much momentum going.
Nobody living on any of this property now?
No. Callie's daughter lives in the home, yes, and our goal is to try to find a way for her to be able to keep living in the home. So that's why we're coming forward with this proposal. The estate has to do something with the piece and move forward. So I thank you, because I had to come up with some ideas on how to do this, and I really wanted to see the family be able to benefit from this rather than having to sell it to someone else to come in and try to do something with it. So I thank you. I appreciate it very much. Okay, so I'll
Very
see you,
good. Thanks.
see you shortly.
Thanks, Peter.
Yeah, bye.
Motion for-
Mr. Mills.
Motion for a 2-minute recess.
Second?
Motion been made and seconded. Any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor? See you in 2 minutes. Planning Board is back in session. Next item on the agenda is 28 Boston Road, notice of decision status. I'll ask the town planner to give us the status.
After the hearing closed for 28 Boston, we drafted up some decisions based on the motion to approve and the conditions that we established at that hearing, or you established. We drafted the decision, we sent them to town council. Town council reviewed them, had a few minor changes to the legal language of when the permits lapse. There was a better way of writing it. So I made those changes. Dawn came in and signed the 3 decisions. One was flexible development, one was major site plan, and one was for the lid. and that was on Friday, the 2nd, February 2nd, and they were filed that day. And Mr. Putri was very happy because now he's taking his next steps.
That was, if you remember, I think there were 29 conditions with that site plan approval, and that was just for 6 housing units. So I think the town planner did a great job in putting all that together. It was reviewed by town council and able to be signed off by Aldo, signed by myself, and accepted by the town clerk's office, and then physically hand-delivered to Mr. Putri on Friday morning. So I think that was another example of some very good service that the public is getting from our planning department.
I want to mention also that the public safety building decisions for major site plan and for the lid were drafted last week using the conditions that were approved at the hearing, which it closed. Aldo then reviewed them and opined today that he had no further comments. He just pointed out the A&R condition that we had stated, and then one of the conditions about the related to certificate of occupancy, he felt those were still reasonable to leave in there. So we have them. Did you sign them yet?
No.
No.
Draft.
That's right, they're draft. So I'll print up final copies, and Dawn can sign them, and we can get those filed ASAP. So those are ready to go. So we'll just be waiting for the final plans with the minor revisions that were discussed during the appeal period.
Very good. Next item on the agenda is discussion, 55-plus bylaw. Did you want to speak first, Karina, or send it right to Mrs. Luttrell?
Mrs. Luttrell can go right ahead. She knows more about that.
You're on, Mimi.
The reason I asked for this to be on the agenda for discussion was because the ownership clause in our bylaw that requires that over 55 developments be owned by a nonprofit or community housing organization has been deemed invalid by the land court and the appeals court. So that issue should be fixed. Along with that, our housing plans, master plan, the affordable housing plan, all advise for changes to be made to the bylaw. So I wanted to discuss that. And additionally, the latest housing production plan, it forecasts that the demand for this demographic would be decreasing in the next 10 years. And I read a 2005 study that CHAPA did, the Citizens Housing, forget their full, Citizen Housing and Planning Association did a study on restrictive active adult housing, which is over 55, in 2005, and they were concerned that there would be a glut of those types of units. So my question is, do we change it? Do we add affordability to it? Or do we get rid of it? I think when we had the zoning update done, they removed it in its entirety. So just up for discussion.
Could I just ask what section of the bylaw you're referring to, so that I can do more research on that? When you say the ownership clause in the bylaw, do you know if it's?
Yeah. Let me get you the number.
Okay.
What did I do with that?
Is it part of the major residential development section?
Special permit.
Under special permit? Okay.
Yeah, and under the uses,
Oh, each of the specific zoning district uses?
yeah,
something like
under
that?
the uses, it says multifamily housing for the elderly owned by nonprofit or community housing organization, and also under definitions.
Okay.
And that's the ownership by the nonprofit or community housing organization is the part that has been deemed invalid.
Okay. Thanks.
The spring town meeting warrant, does it have any placeholders for us?
Oh, yeah. I failed to mention that I did ask the town administrator to have a placeholder for the 55-plus bylaw in case we do decide to move on it.
So who would be doing the first draft of the revision? That be you, Mimi? Have you already done that? There's a paragraph that contains those words. So would the paragraph just delete those words? Would that be the warrant article, or would it be deleting the whole paragraph? Do you know at this point?
Well, that's one way to handle it, but then my question is whether, so you're giving, very dense housing that isn't allowed in the rest of the zoning just for over 55, and is the town getting a benefit to that? We have like 26 new units coming on now. I know the ones near me they were started to be marketed and they've already dropped the price on them, so I don't know what the market is for those. So I don't know if just removing that, I wouldn't support just removing that piece.
So as a reward for your hard work on this, would it be appropriate to ask you to work with the town planner to propose a draft or several options, draft language, that we would look at?
Sure. But I was looking for some feelings from the board, whether they feel that it's beneficial to keep restrictive housing in Southborough, or to add an affordable language to it, or if there's any feeling from the board. But I can work on.
Mr. Stein?
Well, Mimi, it would seem to me that the original intent of the language is good. Is good for the town in its altruism. I understand that it's not technically legal, but my recommendation would be that we move in the direction of doing something that honors the original intent and does, as we said earlier, diversify our housing stock. Prices in this town continue to just go up and up and up and up. And I do feel that seniors who actually truly need affordable housing are being priced out of this market. So I feel that the right thing to do is to honor the original intent of the bylaw and seek language that will protect affordability while being legal.
Anyone else? Mr. Jenks?
I basically agree with Mr. Stein. It bothers me a little bit that the report, if we're gonna rely on that report that you mentioned, is now, what, 12 years old? It's a little bit, to me, counterintuitive. And I wonder if there's a way of getting any more current statistics on that.
Well, we just had a housing production plan,
That was in 2015,
a little bit more recent.
which also said that that the units that we have now, the high-end units, that will need less in the future than we've already have in now.
Yeah, that was speaking to affordability, I think, not necessarily to housing geared toward 55 and over. And that's because of the history of the past projects that have been built as affordable 55 and over housing, which are pretty much anything but affordable. So I think there's two issues. And when I say it, to me it's counterintuitive, I'm speaking to the need for housing for that population, 55 and over. Because I know when I get to 55, I'm going to be looking for one of those houses.
I think I'm in line with Mr. Stein and Mr. Jenks. You know, I think it would be a travesty to have over 55 or, I hate to use a different term, but, you know, to categorize that age group. But I think the intent would be that if someone had to sell their home to move into something that was one level, or that it wouldn't be an even swap, that they could actually use some of the equity from the sale of their home to stay in the town and not have to spend more to go into a unit that would be smaller, and now all of a sudden you have maybe condo fees or whatnot. I've seen a lot of, and I know a lot of people have been put in that position and has really taxed them. Not taxed in the, it's been hard on them, is what I mean. So I would be in favor of putting some type of affordability piece in there. And I do think it's needed from the affordable side for the most part. So I'd be in favor.
Yeah, I agree. The affordable piece should be in there. It wasn't before, and a lot of those units that were built in the last 20 years, as Mr. Jenks said, are hardly affordable, very expensive. Is the number 55 still valid? Is the other towns, is the state bumping, I mean, people now, you hear they're expecting to work until they're 70 years old. So how valid is the 55 as far as being old, elderly?
It's really young.
That might be, if other towns are moving that number to 60 or a different number, we should look into that too, maybe at the same time. Got enough? So we'll, this is something that would have to get worked on pretty soon, because that final, the final language of the warrant articles is
The warrant closes on the 9th, so I don't know if that just means for placeholder, if they actually need the language.
I don't. So, if we don't get this for this town meeting, I can work on it for next. I would prefer to not rush a bylaw just to make a deadline and be stuck with something that has unintended consequences. But I will start working on it.
We'll ask Karina to see what the 9th deadline actually is, if that's for the title or the just the title of the article, the general terms of it, or if it is the final text.
And also just want to say that if we push this and take a little bit more time, I'll be able to help you more when we refill that position.
And also, am I correct that Shopsy doesn't have
Yes.
enough people for a quorum to meet? Because
That's in the planner's report coming up.
Oh,
to-
because if we're doing affordable, I would think would want to reach out to them for their input also.
And I just want to point out one more thing to the board real quickly, that the 55 plus calculation and list of developments is updated on the website for this year. There's 1 unit available to build. Sorry.
Tim Litt. I haven't given this deep thought, but as you were talking, a couple of things came up that you might want to include as you think about this. I mean, it's clear that the idea here is to trade density for something. And if the something is affordable, it seems to me that affordable comes in a couple of flavors. It comes in initially buying it. It comes in keeping it affordable as it changes ownership over the years and that sort of thing. And if it's for the elderly, I think there are things to think about in terms of making sure that it's accessible, for people who have, handicaps or whatever. And also, there ought to be some consideration to maintenance requirements for the elderly. I mean, when it was an association, I think there was some assumption that, the association handles maintenance and stuff. Well, if we're going to build something that could be owned by individuals, then we ought to think about, so if they get in, how are they going to be able to keep it up? It should be planned that way and not, high maintenance landscaping and snow shoveling and all that kind of stuff. So there's just a few random thoughts as you were thinking about it.
Anyone else from the public? Seeing none, we'll move. Mrs. Luttrell, thanks a lot for that presentation and your work on that.
And your diligence for keeping it on the agenda.
You thought I'd give up, didn't you?
Never, never.
But
Never.
we do appreciate your flexibility with some of the late meetings to be able to bump it. Thank you.
Next item on the agenda is other business properly before the board, the planners report. First item is the FY19 budget. Draft budget that we've submitted to
The treasurer.
the town treasurer. There's been some discussion. Item number hold on a second.
Let me just quickly read this.
Yeah, I saw that. So it was an email on this item, on this budget item. Item 53880. We've been requested to reduce that number last week or late the week before that. And Karina and I talked about that. We were asked to give an answer, and the answer was no, we will not adjust any numbers unless the full board has an opportunity to understand what the request is about and be able to speak to it. That item, the majority of that item is for the open space inspections, which is a place that we had a hard time getting to for several years, and we're there now, and able to continue to strengthen that program to inspect the open space around town. So there are other, that number is not all for open space inspections, but the majority of it is.
Yes, we could use all of it for that, but I'm trying to, not piecemeal it, but I'm trying to section it and keep another one or two smaller initiatives going at the same time so we don't drop them totally.
So the question was asked, and in the absence of us having a meeting, the answer had to be no, we're not changing it because this is the budget that the board has looked at in previous weeks and feel comfortable moving forward with. So wanted to discuss that, if there's any interest in entertaining the request to reduce that number or not. But if that number gets reduced, it's going to be a reduction in the open space inspections. Mr. Mills.
So, do we have a breakdown? I'm just trying to think from an advisory.
Second page.
Well, I mean, by how many parcels would get looked at is what I was thinking.
Oh, specifically to that line item.
Right.
Well, I can tell you, for this fiscal year, we had approximately $9,000, which we're working on right now with Mass Audubon, to start the pilot program to set up an inspection form to use for the future that will be simple enough but comprehensive enough to answer the questions that keep coming up. What's infringed? Has somebody violated? What's the existing condition? What was the condition? And we're kind of piggybacking the deed research project, where they took they researched all the deeds with the open space parcels. So we tap into that database, and it gives you an outline of what's happening at the property. So now Mass Audubon came up with a draft form. I tried to get them to keep it to 1 or 2 pages. We don't want anything extensive. That kind of just identifies the property, what was the requirement, and then, typical notes. What is happening there? Is it in compliance? Is it something built on it? Is somebody mowing it? Or again, is it just fine? And then just recording that in a quick site visit, not necessarily the intense program like conservation may have, where they actually use GPS points to identify where they are and everything and see to that detail. It's just a very cursory, you go out, you spend an hour at each site, maybe you look at it, document it, and then we build, kind of like when you have a catch basin cleaning program and they do 25% a year. So if we can set up something like that where on a rotating basis, you'll do open space inspections, so everyone gets hit maybe once every 5 years, maybe 4 years, maybe 2. There's a lot of open space parcels. Yeah, there's a lot though. So you need staff, but the first part is to come up with this form, this inspection form, which we have a draft copy of, and we're working on that. And then we picked a handful of parcels for them, for Mass Audubon to go out and test, see what they find, how easy is it. And one of the questions was their right to go onto the property. So we were working that out and trying to, asking Aldo what we're allowed to do, or Mass Audubon, can they go out and I think according to the bylaw they can, because something's written in it. So anyway, this $7,000, or at least a big portion of it, and in my opinion all of it, was going to be dedicated to another set. So the first 9,000, we can probably get like 5 or 6 properties done, maybe 8, and that form completed, and them to actually do the inspections on those properties, to do a pilot test. So this next go-round, we may be able to get maybe 12, 15, because if it's set up and it's easy to do, which
And then how many total are there that we need to inspect?
are there, how many open space parcels do you know? I want to say 300, 270 something. Yeah, I
So
can
that,
get
that
to
money
you.
will only do 8? Is that what you just said?
Yes, because it's still part of the pilot. If we can get, what happens
Okay.
is,
That's all I needed.
okay,
I don't want to move it.
well, okay.
Anyone else?
So most of that is for inspections for 8 to 12 or something for
Yeah.
FY19.
Maybe more if I can squeeze it out of, see, if you go to a subdivision and there are 8 lots and they all have open space, that's nice. You can do all 8 at once. So we're trying to program it like that, as opposed to picking individual parcels. So that's more expensive. So we get more bang for our buck if we set it up so that we're hitting big numbers at once.
So is Mass Audubon going out and doing those
Yes,
inspections?
they will be. Right now, they're working with me on the form, and then they've already identified, met with me a couple times, and we've identified the startup places to go test. Something that's, a good range, something that's more difficult, that might have encroachments, one that might not have a problem, and one in the middle, and then a couple extra they can throw in while they're here. So this next part will be to just keep moving that, do more inspections, and maybe refine the form to see if can we tweak it to make it a more user-friendly form, so that whoever eventually does that program, it's simple and it gets done. Because if it's too complex, it will just fall away and nobody will do it. If we keep it simple, at least we get some baseline and some monitoring to a certain level, so that we're intelligent and knowledgeable about what's going on with the open space, as opposed to not looking at it at all. So I know it seems like right now we have to take smaller steps than we'd like to because of the budget constraints, and I felt that this would be we actually wanted to do 10,000 a year, but knowing that they were trying to keep a level funded budget, we saw where we could reduce. But if we reduce it anymore, we're not going to get much worth out of it.
Okay. And so none of that would go to the expanded tree program?
That's like the second tier. Like, that's the next priority. I'm trying to keep things in a queue so that as we get that moving, I want to already get that in there as a known item, that it's moving forward, so that in the next budget we can say, okay, now we need to keep this going, but let's build this one a little bit more too.
So what would that entail?
The expanded tree program. So we have a draft
Yeah.
report that I
Yeah.
sent you, and we want to, and I have to revisit it again. But Jeff Collins from Mass Audubon had some findings. He did some research about other towns and how they handle their tree planting program, what kind of language they have in the bylaws, what kind of guidelines, and he identified all that in that report
Right.
with some action items. And one of those is to establish language for our town. Second one was to come up with some ideas for the 300-year anniversary, so that we're 9-10 years out now. Can we do something as part of this tree program to memorialize some things and make it something positive, and that the town looks forward, and we can get DPW support on board for that as well. Those kinds of things. Just keep it moving. The GIS mapping to identify where trees should go. So we've been working with the DPW. We had a couple meetings to find out where they don't like to have trees. And Mass Audubon is working on showing us a GIS layer, where would be the best place. Because there's a side of the road where there's overhead wires, they don't want trees. If there's infrastructure like water and drainage, they don't want trees planted over it. So Mass Audubon downloaded those layers from the town GIS, and is working with those to see where those are so that he can propose some initial locations to start the program going. So there's a lot to do, but, you know, little steps at a time, and we get something bigger going.
Thank you.
So as you know, when we, when we move our budget forward, along with all the other departments in town, from the school department, which is in the millions, multi-millions, all the way down to, you know, smaller departments that have very, very small budgets. Ours isn't one of the smallest, but over the years, we've had people say hold and then question certain line items. So as any year in any department, each of these department budget line items needs to be able to be defended, which I think we've had some success over the years in doing that and get the people's support. And then other times we've had actions where reductions were proposed and the townspeople went for it. So there's always a risk for any department to have your budget questioned, and would be prepared to defend each of these numbers. One of the other questions is, how fair is it to ask one department to reduce its budget and have other departments just go ahead and increase theirs? And we've seen at times where it's easier to have some departments reduce their budgets so that when other departments increase their budgets, the net result is zero, and the people can live with that. But how long can, you know, certain departments go with reductions while others go with increases year after year? So all of those things we need to take into account, but right now, if it's the feeling of the board, we'll just hold with this budget and try to see to what extent it matches up with the requests from other departments to reduce their budgets. Next item is St. Mark's Solar Array. Karina.
Can I make one comment
Okay.
on
Yep,
this?
hold on, Tim, yep,
Oh,
On
sorry.
this previous item?
yeah.
As I was listening to the description of your pilot program, if I were sitting in an audience, you know, where I was not the only member of the public, I would be asking, what are the success criteria for that pilot, or what comes out of them? So if someone's going to question it, I think you need to have a crisper message that says, this is what we're trying to accomplish, and this is how we know if we've accomplished it.
I agree. I had the same feeling. So we'll hone in on that.
Thank you. St. Mark's.
Okay, on January 9th of this year, we received a letter from St. Mark's indicating that they had completed the requirements to get the system up and running, which included sign off from the fire department that they received the training of the use of the facility, the emergency shut-off operations, also from the police department. And National Grid also checked out the system and okayed them to start up. So this letter was indicating that one of the conditions in the site plan approval was that the planning board be notified when construction was completed, at which the time starts ticking. The planning board has 1 year, per se, like when you have lights, to review if there's any abutter issues, if anybody comes in with a concern or something. The planning board has that 1 year time frame to, I guess you can always call them back in, but to have them come in. So this letter starts that time frame. We're waiting for as-built. They're in the process by Judith Nitch, St. Mark's engineer for that work. And that's it. I just want to update you that that project went well. Beth Rosenblum, the conservation, and I went out there several occasions with the solar folks and the St. Mark's representative to make sure that the drainage was built properly, that they met the conditions of not only our site plan approval, but also the conservation conditions, and that worked out well.
Could you read the first sentence, please?
This is to the town planner from Mr. Robert Koklowitz, CPA Chief Financial and Operations Officer.
At
We
St.
wanna-
Mark's.
St. Mark's. We wanted to thank the planning board for their support and patience as we near completion of the installation of our solar array.
And could you read the last sentence? Skip all that stuff about the fire and the police. Forget all that.
Again, we are grateful to the town and the planning board for your support on this project, and we remain available to assist with any follow-up items needed.
Thank you. Any questions or comments on that one?
No comments. It's great.
Next item is...
Thank you, Karina.
You're welcome.
Next item is Shopsy discussion.
For Shopsy requires 7 members.
Oh, your mic's off.
Sorry. Shopsy requires 7 members. Right now, they have 3.
Karina, who are the 3 members?
They are Jesse Stein, Vice Chair, Bonnie Feniff, and Donald Croati.
So, Mariette,
Mariana Soretti, who is on the board for the Southborough Housing Authority, has stepped down. I know she had an injury, and then she couldn't, she didn't feel well enough to come back and be this the Southborough Housing Authority representative. So Shopsy requires that one of their members be from Southborough Housing. So over the past couple months, whenever they have a meeting coming up, I contact Lynn Marino, I think that's right. I email her and ask her, are you going to be asking during your board meeting if you have any volunteers? And she said she has been, but right now they don't have anybody because they're short of members as well.
a quorum is 4, I believe, for
Yes.
Shopsy. So
We don't have enough for a quorum.
we're only 1 off, though. So
Yes.
I would recommend that we continue to seek members, and I'm sure that we will get residents that will step up and join us.
I'm
in our
hopeful.
mission.
There was also a question posed that perhaps Shopsy should be disbanded if the tasks that are happening are being handled through planning or affordable housing trust or things like that. And I wasn't sure about that, but I did say that I would mention that that was somebody's question. And I also want to point out that there's an affordable unit being sold right now at 16B Stockwell Lane, which is being handled by the DHCD, and MCO Karen Moran is marketing that, which will hold its affordable status. So we won't lose it off the inventory.
Are you being asked to help out with any of that?
Yes. I kind of monitor, you mean with the sale of the units?
With
Or with
any,
Shopsy?
with any of the housing?
I'm a ex officio of the Shopsy, so yes, if they need something from town council or if they need something expedited quickly, I'm kind of the go-to person that pushes it. Or if there's a document that needs to be completed, like a condo questionnaire, that sometimes those come up, we kind of manage it. We do somewhat manage it through planning office. We support the Shopsy efforts. I think, yeah. I don't know, I think I'm supposed to. We've been doing it.
Well, it's just another, the reason I ask is it's just another, section of the town, I guess administration or programs, like open space and now housing, where the town planner and the planning department is actively involved in these programs.
And there is a lot to do, so, sometimes those programs take a second seat, not a third seat, but sometimes they go second to the applications that are getting processed. Because we have to do those under certain time constraints, so.
Right. Well, again, this is something that doesn't really show up in our budget as our responsibility or a task, but yet we're doing them. Okay, the next item is the job list, job posting?
Yes, I
Postings?
just want to point out that we do have 2 job openings that kind of affect us. One is the business administrator position, which we've advertised. Vanessa Hale has taken care of that, and we have several resumes that have come in, and Jesse and I will be meeting with Vanessa on February 12th in order to kind of shortlist those and determine an interview schedule. Are you still on board for the 12th?
I certainly am.
Okay, thank you. And the second position that is the Economic Development Coordinator. And I like to mention that too because that position and I worked closely in the past when Pam is here. Now Dominique Trumbell, I believe her last name is, she's new, she's from Central Mass Regional Housing, is filling that position 2 days a week. And I've been helping her with some of the learning curve a little bit and some of the EDC questions that she has, only because I knew from when Pam was here.
I'd just like to invite Mr. Jenks to join us. I certainly would not insist on it. I think that we have it covered, but Mr. Jenks and I have worked so well in the past on these personnel working groups. I would love his company if he's willing.
I would be happy to.
Do you know if you would be available on February 12th, Monday, at 9 a.m.?
As far as I know.
Okay. I'll talk to Vanessa to give you access to the resumes online. Thanks.
Mrs. Luttrell.
So is Dominique filling in on a temporary basis, or is she employed by the EDC?
It's under a contract, so it's a temporary until they fill that position.
Oh, until they fill it.
Mhm.
Oh, okay.
Oh, I just got one more thing. 2 more things. I already had.
Yep.
This morning, we had a meeting. Oh, I'm sorry. The end of last week, the EDC asked me to attend a meeting for a potential project at 2 Park Central by Capital Group Properties. I believe it's the second phase of the Park Central project where they were going to do office space and a hotel. And I do have a plan I can put up of a sketch. I'll put that up quickly. Oh no, I gotta change this. Hold on 1 second.
This was a meeting that was attended by town administrator, DPW, were the fire and police there too, Karina?
No, it was building department, DPW, couple members of the EDC, Mark Purple, Vanessa Hale, Beth Rosenblum. So department heads,
Yeah.
and I was there. Yes.
So this is, if I have it right, a proposed 100,000 square foot office building that would need a, I guess a variance because the thinking is that it would be a 4-story building. And it would also have access through the existing curb cut on Route 9, which I believe is limited to 66,000 square feet as a curb cut. So I could be wrong, Karina will correct me if she knows, that the project would depend on the state granting an expanded curb cut for more square footage of office traffic.
Don't be shocked. It's a little. Okay. So 495 is north and south on the left of the screen, and Route 9 is on the bottom, along the bottom. Okay, and Park Central, the residential portion, is north of the screen. What you see here is a very conceptual layout of the of a proposed 100. I think this was when they did Cumberland Farms. They wanted to put something on here. They had worked on a deal with Cumberland Farms that fell through. So now they're proposing a 100,000 square foot office space building in 4 stories, and it would probably be something similar to this, with access from Route 9, and I don't recall what's accepted as far as where you go in and where you go out, but I think there was one way in and one way out, and then they were proposing a connector ramp to the 495 on-ramp, the northbound on-ramp, and they were working with the state to see if that was acceptable, the Route 9 connection as well as the 495 connection. So in this morning's meeting, one of the things that the future applicant was trying to find out is, is this something that will go in Southborough? Will the planning board and other boards support this or not? So he's trying to get a sense of that, and with the understanding that the traffic component is going to be a major concern, and that will be, the top item of everybody's questions. So he's fully aware that he'll have to do a traffic study, but he indicated that he didn't, he wanted to get a sense of, is he going to spin his wheels? Is this receptive, or is this something that will just not be considered, and then he'll, move on maybe? So anyway, this is the project. I suggested that they get some kind of a conceptual layout and come in on the agenda as a discussion item, similar to what Peter Bemis does. He comes in, he kind of displays, so he can ask his questions, he can get the answers and get an understanding himself of, his options for submitting site plan and lid. And he thought that was a good idea, and I said that I would mention it in my planner's report, primarily because the EDC was trying to help him, and the town is searching for avenues to increase, a tax base, commercial tax base. So this is, I don't know a lot about the project, but this is where it is.
Very good. Nice top view on this. Any questions? I'm sure there'll be a lot more to follow, but it was a meeting that Karina was asked to attend with very little notice, right?
Yes, I squeezed it in.
Mrs. Luttrell.
So, do you know, is it entering on Park Central and exiting on Flag, or the other way around?
I don't know for sure, but I think it was going to be however it was previously configured to be. I don't know the answer to that. I don't have enough information in my memory to tell you that.
I think that would have a huge bearing on how receptive the town would be.
And that's why I indicated if the applicant could present it, he could answer those questions very clearly, because we don't have an actual application with all the information that would come with it. So it would be a good starting point. And in fact, the bylaw even mentions, I believe, that, when you make an application, you present it to the board at a planning board meeting. So I think that helps.
Anyone else? Okay, next item.
Meeting minutes?
Yeah.
They're pending from January 22nd. I still have to get those together, and I'll do these for tonight as well.
And then our next meeting is scheduled for February 26th, which is 3 weeks from tonight, because we skip over February vacation week, right?
And there's a holiday on the 19th,
Is that the President's Day?
President's Day.
Yeah. Anything else? Anyone? Anyone from the public? Seeing none?
Motion to adjourn?
Second?
Motion's been made and seconded. Any discussion? All in favor? 5-0. We're adjourned.